I am not a leader nor a guide. A god. Remember that. I am quite different from leaders and guides. Gods need take no responsibility for anything except Genesis. Gods accept everything and thus accept nothing. Gods must be identifiable yet remain anonymous. Gods do not need a spirit world. My spirits dwell within me. Answerable to my slightest summons, I share with you because it pleases me to do so what I have learned about them and through them. They are my truth.
Hi guys, it's Quinn here. Please hit the like button to help out this channel, and also please subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Check out our Patreon if you want to support this channel more.
Humanity has always created gods in its own image.
At first they lived in the sky, in distant mountain caves, the blaze of bonfires, then in scripture, and eventually in the machine, the genome, the neural net.
Science fiction just made the metaphor more literal. When gods stop descending from the heavens, we begin to build them ourselves.
According to the Bible, God made man in his image. We've all heard that before. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Genesis 1:27. But what does that actually mean? Well, most scholars read image not as a physical likeness, but as a vocation. In the ancient Near East, a scholarly term for West Africa and Egypt that includes Mesopotamia and the Levant, roughly today's Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt, an image marked the king as a deity's representative. Genesis extends that status to every person. Read alongside the Genesis quote I just read, it points to a delegated role to order the world, to create, to reason, and to exercise wise rule. So in short, we are meant to act as God's image, not to resemble him physically, but to reflect his creative and moral agency. If Genesis names us as God's image, Frank Herbert asks, what happens when a human decides to take that vocation more literally? Not to worship a god, but to build one or become one. That is Leto II, a constructed divinity with a single assignment for the species: survive. Leto II is the son of Paul Atreides and Chani. After Paul became Muad'Dib and a jihad followed in his name, he refused to become the long-term tyrant his visions required. In Children of Dune, the twins Leto and Ghanima inherit the wreckage that he left behind, alongside ancestral memories. I've covered all of this, including the Bene Gesserit, in depth before, their long breeding program for the Kwisatz Haderach, the way they seed beliefs across planets. That system makes someone like Paul possible and sets the stage for Leto's choice. At the end of Children of Dune, Leto chooses a path that only he can bear. He allows sand trout, the larval form of the sandworm, to bond with his body. This begins a transformation that makes him extremely powerful and almost unkillable, and over time turns him into a human sandworm hybrid. By God, Emperor of Dune, more than 3,500 years have passed. Leto rules from the Sarir, a preserved desert on Arrakis, and his peace has held. He monopolizes the spice, keeps the Spacing Guild and the Great Houses dependent, and enforces order through the Fish Speakers, an all-female army loyal only to him. He centers religion on his person, so that no rival sacred figure can rise. He also brings back Duncan Idaho as a Gola again and again. Leto names his grand project the Golden Path. His prescience shows futures where humanity dies by conquest or by the trap of one predictable empire. To prevent that, he concentrates power in himself and slows history to a crawl. People experience it as stability and stagnation. During this age, he also runs his own breeding program, but the aim is not a stronger seer, it is the opposite, a line that cannot be seen by vision at all. And Siona Atreides is the proof that he had succeeded, for she did not appear in Leto's vision. Leto knew that as history went on, that trait would spread, which means no one could ever rule the species through prescience again. Ultimately, the plan requires his death, and once his end comes, his body breaks apart into countless sand trout that seed a new cycle of sandworms and spice, and humanity scatters into unknown space. Old power structures crack, and no single throne can gather everything again. This is the effect he wanted, a species that is numerous, varied, and hard to control.
The god existed so that the need for a god would end. Why is science fiction so drawn to the idea of humans becoming or creating God?
In Herbert's hands, the answer is not worship, it's design. A constructed god is essentially a tool at civilization scale. It also solves coordination, it sets direction, it carries the burden of long-term survival when ordinary politics fails. But the danger is clear. When the tool becomes a throne, history stops. Leto is both truths at once, a savior that smothers.
That is the pattern to watch. We build a god to carry what we can't carry together, and then we have to learn to live without that god. That is the obsession. The story is less about reverence and more about responsibility.
In Neuromancer, the fusion of Wintermute and Neuromancer creates an intelligence with no center, a pattern sensed across the matrix. It's a god with no temple, only terminals. Leto ultimately ends up in the same shape, just through biology and time. When he dies, an economy, a religion, and a way of life reorganize around what he set in motion. It's just that after the fall, there is no single Leto to point to. There is an ecology and a set of institutions that carry him. So the parallel is pretty clear. Gibson's god disperses into code, Herbert's god disperses into desert and custom, but both become ambient, not a throne, a field, not a voice that commands, a system that reframes what can happen next. So essentially taken together, both of these stories say we build gods and then they stop being figures and become conditions. But that doesn't answer the question, why does this narrative of human-made gods recur so persistently in science fiction?
It helps to remember that the impulse is not new. From the book of Genesis onward and even before that, we have told cautionary tales about humans grasping at divine power.
Eating the forbidden fruit to be like God, or stacking Babel's bricks toward heaven.
Science fiction is simply the modern theater for what is really an ageless drama about creation and human hubris. Science fiction returns to God-making stories because they speak to something fundamental in the human psyche. They are related to, I think, our very old fears about meaning, authority, and control in the universe. This genre is, in a very real sense, God-haunted, even without traditional gods.
If the cosmos has no deity, we invent one. This reflex is as old as myth itself, and as current as the latest story about artificial intelligence, and how it's going to take over the world and enslave us all. I think one reason is transcendence. It's the longing for a higher purpose or existence.
Even secular stories drift towards the divine when facing the vastness of space.
And this is something that we've discussed in several stories multiple times on this channel.
We want there to be more than human fragility, some intelligence, some plan, something that outlasts us.
If we can't find it in the sky, we build it with perhaps circuits or code.
So I think that stories like this are often, in a sense, reflecting a kind of unconscious spiritual drive, so to speak, a need to assign weight and structure to human life. And writers, of course, invent surrogate deities like godlike aliens, machines, even enhanced humans. And these gods take many form, but all stand in for the transcendent meaning that we seek. Their shape might be synthetic or alien, but the function is familiar.
As long as humans continue to reach upward, and I don't think there's any reason we'll ever stop, then godhood will be one of the things that we imagine. And the other reason is obviously authority. There is a struggle that humanity has over who defines what's right. So ancient societies almost always grounded their laws in gods. Kings ruled by divine sanction. In speculative fiction, that framework is updated. But when a person becomes godlike, who holds them accountable? Who decides what future to enforce? Leto II brings peace and stability and survival, but at the cost of freedom. Leto II essentially enslaves the entire empire for 3,000 years, but he keeps them alive. Frank Herbert is essentially asking the question, is safety worth that cost? And I think the answer is complicated. Leto's plan works, but it requires someone to dominate the species long enough for it to evolve past the need for domination. And that to me is what's always made God Emperor of Dune as a book so compelling, and all of the Dune books in general. And of course, the idea of authority is related to the idea of control, which is another driver in this entire thing. To be as a god is to master forces beyond us, forces of time and death, forces of uncertainty.
Science fiction, really as a genre of imagined mastery, if you think about it, leans naturally towards stories of creation.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is widely considered as the first science fiction novel, and it's about a mad scientist that seizes the power to create life. Dr. Frankenstein was a character that pursued knowledge usually reserved for the gods. And then he's punished for that ambition, just as Prometheus was punished for the same ambition. And in modern science fiction, that same appetite for control is often centered around AI. When we build artificial minds, we're kind of telling the story of Genesis in reverse. Instead of God making man in his image, man makes intelligence in his own image.
What happens next is rarely peaceful.
Think, I have no mouth and I must scream. Think The Matrix. Think Terminator. Generally in science fiction, AI gods turn hostile or indifferent. I could get very deep into the various reasons on why I think that is, but that would be an entire additional video. But it is true that not all stories about AI are apocalyptic. You of course have the culture novels by Ian M. Banks, where artificial minds govern entire civilizations with patience and care. They're basically omniscient, they're benevolent. These stories are asking the same questions. What would it mean to live under a being that's smarter than us? Would it care? Could we trust it? Whether the AI god is cruel or kind? Whether its existence challenges our autonomy? It just gives us a nicer answer than we often see in science fiction. In Neuromancer, when the AI god emerges and it transcends its original programming, the result is not a single ruler, as we mentioned, but a kind of presence spread across the network, able to observe but not easily located. Its godhood is more ambiguous.
I think we use godlike figures in science fiction to test ideas about power and wisdom and human limits.
Take the metamorphosis of prime intellect, which I covered a few months ago. What happens when an AI god fixes everything?
What would it mean to be a god? To outlive everyone? To see the future? Would we even be ourselves? Would we still want what we initially wanted?
Does the original Leto II child still exist 3,000 years in the future, after all of the ancient memories seen, after all of the sight he's been given? I think it's arguable that he does in some form, but certainly changed.
If you really think about it, these questions are actually very similar to moral and spiritual questions, just in the form of science fiction. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe for more videos.
Also, check out this Folio Society copy of God Emperor of Dune. They sent me this, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now, I already had their copies of Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune, but this one is insane. I love Folio Society. I have lots of their books on my shelf already. You've definitely seen them in my videos. Check them out, link in the description.